بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight inshallah we're going to complete a few of the remaining masaa'il of day 7 of the newborn. So we're going to discuss mainly Aqeeqah and the last remaining thing of the other sunan that are quicker to mention, and that is going to be shaving the head. The last remaining thing of day 7 would be naming the child, but inshallah that's a whole fiqh of its own, fiqh of naming and nicknames, etc. So we'll do that inshallah in the future lecture, and a few miscellaneous masaa'il inshallah. So we spoke on how to calculate day 7, and we spoke on the sunan the day the child is born, and we mentioned that these aspects and these actions, they are sunnah actions. Most of them are sunnah actions. The only one that would not be sunnah, which is logical, and that is naming the child. And we'll discuss even naming a child that is still born, or even if a lady had a miscarriage or something, naming that child inshallah in the future. But otherwise most of these actions are sunnah, and therefore if they were missed, then there's no problem. If they were missed, there's no problem, there would be no sin. But the reward aspect would not be there. So the remaining thing we mentioned how to calculate day 7. And then on day 7, what do? You going to, as we said, you're going to shave the hair. So shaving the hair, the ulama mention, is it before the Aqeeqah or after the Aqeeqah? So here the Shafi'i scholars say that it is after the Aqeeqah. Because slaughtering and then you shave the head. They say like Hajj. In Hajj you're going to slaughter your hadi, and thereafter you're going to shave your head. That's the sunnah method. It's the sunnah method to slaughter your animal, then shave your head. The Maliki scholars say that you shave the head before slaughtering the Aqeeqah. So in essence the mas'ala is broad scope, and whatever a person is able to do, whichever one works out better for him, then he can do it. So now when we say shaving the head, we mean shaving the head. So the ulama say that what would the sunnah be? The sunnah would be to shave the head, meaning not to cut the hair. So shaving the head will either happen with a razor or with a machine. That basically what you need to do to achieve a sunnah of shaving the head in this aspect, in Hajj, etc., is to remove as much of the hair, that the remaining amount in general cannot be removed any further. So if you basically use a razor, use a machine, and you don't have a head on it, so that would be like number 0. If you were to then shave your head, you won't be able to cut the remaining little hair strands that are there, or the root of the hair. You won't be able to cut it with the scissor, and even going with the blade again, with the machine again, won't take anything further out. So that would achieve the sunnah in Hajj and Umrah, and also here. But the ulama say that somebody who knows how to cut the hair of a baby should do it. Why? Because the bones of a baby is soft. The baby will cry, get hurt, etc. So you want to avoid those things. And therefore, if you have somebody who knows how to cut the hair of the baby, or a person can do it without hurting the baby, then the sunnah of cutting the hair will take place. If not, then the sunnah falls. And in some countries, shaving the head, they don't even do it. So this is a sunnah, number 1, as we said, which means it's okay if it's not done. And then it will be a sunnah that falls. And then what about the reward for a sunnah that falls? We spoke about it before. If a person cannot do an action for a reason, and if it has no substitute, what we mentioned it in the fiqh of salah of a sick person, we mentioned there how to do it there. So that's one aspect of shaving the hair. Therefore, cutting the hair with scissors, for example, cutting the hair with a machine, but number 2, 3, 4, etc., it would not fulfill the sunnah. But along with cutting the hair, there's another sunnah. And that is a person, after he cuts the hair, then he takes the hair and he weighs the hair. If it's possible, he has a scale somewhere near, he weighs the hair, and then however much the weight of the hair, then he gives that equal amount in charity of gold or silver. So that means if the hair comes out to, for example, 10 grams, then you look at what's the worth of 10 grams of gold or silver in your currency, and you give that in charity. So the fuqaha differ as to which is better to give. Do you look at gold or silver? Because the hadith says fidda. The hadith where Rasoolullaah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam tells Aisha radiallahu anha to cut the hair of Al-Hasan radiallahu anhu, he says to her, shave his head, and then give the worth in charity. Give the worth in charity in silver. So now the Hanbali fuqaha say it must be silver. They say the hadith mentions silver, so it must be silver. And some of the other fuqaha, they say gold or silver. So like the Shafi'i scholars, they say the hadith mentions silver, but gold generally takes preference over silver. And silver was mentioned because that was what was found. That was what was found there. So that's why perhaps Rasoolullaah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned silver. So what we could take from this is that a person could see which one is more, and then if they can afford to give more, then they can give the gold, if they deem that both can be given, meaning they are not on the Hanbali position. And because the Hanbali position say that the hadith says silver, so we don't go more than that, we don't go anything different to that. And if a person cannot afford as much as the higher of the two, then he can give the lower of the two. That's fine. That is fine. So now in saying that if a person does not have a scale, then they say that a person tries to estimate what the weight of the hair. And generally the hair will be thin and not even much. So it's not even going to be a big amount. It's not going to be a big amount. And then they can then give in charity. So they say so that is, now you can cut the hair. If you cannot cut the hair, then we mentioned two sunnah. One is to cut the hair, and the other is to give in charity. So if a person did not cut the hair, they can still estimate what would the amount be if we did cut the hair, and then give that amount in charity. And now for cutting the hair, the fuqaha say, the Hanbali fuqaha say the cutting of the hair is only done for the boy's hair. Meaning when you say cut, I mean shave. It's only shaved for the boy. They say the general karaha or tahrim of shaving the hair of a female even applies here to the baby. The other fuqaha say it applies to boy and girl. Therefore, you shave hair of boy and girl. But they will specify it only for Aqeeqah. After that, you can't just shave it for no reason. So only for Aqeeqah, for boy and girl. And then you have the aspect of weighing the hair. Or if you shaved and you don't have a scale, you estimate how much and give in charity. And if you did not shave, you still estimate how much would the weight be of the hair approximately if you had shaven, and then you give that in charity. Now, giving this amount in charity, this is a sunnah. So nafil or sunnah charities, we mentioned that they can be given to Muslim and non-Muslim. So here it's not a stipulation that you give it to a Muslim person, the charity, but you can give it to Muslim or non-Muslim. Then after you've shaven the hair, then the fuqaha say that it is sunnah to rub some saffron on the head of the baby, or take saffron, mix it with water, and then rub that on the head of the baby. And others even say khaluf, so like perfume, so like something of perfume, you can put that on the head of the baby as well. That would also count. It would also be a sunnah or a recommendation to put saffron or even a type of perfume on the baby's head. That's what you do as well after shaving the hair. Now, the next thing is, what's the wisdom of doing this? What's the wisdom of shaving the hair? So what is mentioned is that basically the fetus starts developing hair in the 3rd or 4th month of pregnancy. It starts developing hair in the 3rd or 4th month of pregnancy. Then it also develops a kind of moist, waxy, waxy, insulating kind of liquid or something, waxy liquid substance on its skin as it's in the womb. So this substance basically protects the skin of the baby from drying out from anything inside the womb. So like the amniotic fluid, it might dry out the skin. So the baby has this moist, waxy substance on its skin that protects it from that. And then when the baby is born, then it's going to get a shock coming into this new atmosphere. So that waxy layer on the skin protects the baby from that as well. So now the baby's body has follicles. It has follicles that cause little colorless hairs to grow all over the body. Then this is known as embryonic hair. So these hairs, they say that when the baby is born, then the birth hair has microbes. these microbes weaken these follicles. So if you've shaven the hair, then the follicles do not get weakened. Then you've helped the baby avoid that. You've helped the baby avoid that. Then when you've shaven the hair, generally birth hair is a bit weak. It's a bit weak. So now you've given the chance for new, strong, healthy hair to grow. And then also the pores of the head, now they open. They have a chance to open. So what happens when that happens? They kind of like a steamy substance come out of the pores. So now when the pores have this chance to open again so the new hair can grow, then this has a positive and a strengthening effect on the sight and the hearing and the smell of the child. So this is one of the wisdoms of shaving the hair. This is one of the wisdoms of shaving the hair. So what he said is that if too many days go by, like a bit more than a week, a few days past a week, then these the follicles start getting affected by the microbes already. So now shaving the hair now would not have this effect. It will not have this effect. So this is a type of wisdom mentioned. The sunnah is still there to shave. And if you've missed the 7th day, if you've missed the 7th day, then what? Then from this aspect that we mentioned, if it's not too many days past the 7th day, then there's still scope to shave the hair. And we mentioned this specifically for a girl, specifically for a girl. For a guy, for a boy, then there's more scope. We're going to mention it now because the Shafi'i scholars actually touch on this mas'ala. So for a girl, because the exception to shaving the head is for Aqeeqah only. So as close to Aqeeqah as possible that you do it, then you have the chance to still do it. Because essentially, new hairs will start growing anyway. New hairs will start growing anyway, and this birth hair will have outgrown itself. It will already be out. So then this new hair would have grown already at a slower speed, or at a later time. So therefore, the girl's hair should not be shaved if too many days have gone by after the day of shaving, which is the day of Aqeeqah. Before that, also permissible. We said the sunnah is the 7th day. So now for a boy, now the Shafi'i scholars touch on this mas'ala, and they say that if the birth hair, if the person many days or months have gone by, in fact the Shafi'i scholars say if the person has become mature already and the birth hair has not been removed, that's how they phrase it, in the sense that yes, it would have been outgrown, but basically the hairs have not been shaven, the head has not been shaven. So if this boy, his head has never been shaven, and now he realizes the sunnah or wants to implement the sunnah, then here he shaves his head. Weighs the amount, and then gives in charity, just like what we explained. And if his hair had already been shaven, prior in his life, and he did not give this charity, then they say he tries to estimate the amount that the hair might have been in that time, and then he gives that in charity, The next mas'ala we're going to speak about, and that is the masaa'il connected to Aqeeqah. So Aqeeqah refers to, we're not going to go into the language definition of Aqeeqah, but just what it refers to in Sharia, and that is slaughtering an animal at the birth of a baby, at the birth of a child, then you slaughter an animal. This is known as Aqeeqah. So now Aqeeqah, the fuqaha say it's sunnah. It's a sunnah action. As Rasoolullaah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, كُلُّ غُلَامٍ مُرْتَهَنٌ بِعَقِيقَتِهِ, that every newborn is basically murtahan, from like rahan. So rahan is something when let's say you buy something from somebody, and then you don't pay them on the spot. So then they take a safety from you. They say, give me something as a safety. If you don't pay me back at so and such date, then I will sell this thing which you gave me to keep, and then I'll take my payment from that amount and give you the rest. So it's basically a kind of a safety. So it's basically something that is shackled. So every newborn is basically held within, like shackled in, until his Aqeeqah is done. It's like he's a rahan until his Aqeeqah is done. And Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, you do this Aqeeqah on the 7th day. So the Aqeeqah is sunnah, and it's an emphasized sunnah. If a person takes an oath to do Aqeeqah for his child, like let's say, oh Allah, if my child comes out healthy and well, then I take an oath, I will do an Aqeeqah for the child. So in this case, when an oath has been taken, we have spoken on the ruling of an oath before in the chapter of i'tikaf, then in this case it will become obviously an obligatory action to fulfill the oath. Then this Aqeeqah will then change into an obligatory action, from the aspect of the oath. So they say that performing the Aqeeqah, just like what we said with Udhiyyah, performing the Aqeeqah is more virtuous or is better than giving the same amount or more, the same amount that it would cost for an Aqeeqah, or more than that amount in charity. So just giving the money or slaughtering an animal, they say slaughtering an animal would be more virtuous because of the ahadith and the narrations mentioned in the aspect of Aqeeqah. Then Aqeeqah, who is the person that has to perform the Aqeeqah? So the fuqaha say the person who has to perform the Aqeeqah, the Maliki and Hanbali scholars straight up say it is the father. They straight up say it is the father. The Hanbali scholars say to the extent that it's only the father. It's only the father, he can only do it. Someone else can step in the only case when the father has passed away or the father refuses to perform the Aqeeqah. Okay? And the Shafi'i scholars say that the person who's in charge of spending on the child, he's the one in charge of spending on the child. Yes, in most cases it will be the father, but somebody else decides that he's going to take charge of, he's going to look after the child. Somebody else says he's going to look after the child, then this person will perform Aqeeqah on behalf of the child. Either it is like sometimes it would be somebody who from your relatives. We spoke before, who are those people you have to support? So then it could fall on one of those people, a brother to the father, your uncle, that means the child, the baby's uncle or cousin, whatever it may be, depends on the situation. Then that person who's now responsible for the obligatory expenses of the child, that person performs the Aqeeqah, that person performs the Aqeeqah on the child. So if anyone else wants to perform Aqeeqah, they need permission from this person who is responsible for Aqeeqah on the child. So a person cannot come without the permission of the person who the Aqeeqah is on, and then here's an animal, I bought it for the child. It has to be from the person it has to be with the permission of that person, it has to be with the permission of that person. If we say it goes to somebody else other than the Hanbali position. So they say, the Hanbali fuqaha say, even if the father cannot afford it, even if he cannot afford it, it is still on him. It is still on him. And they say, why is this so? They say it's on the father because he can perform it any time in his life when he has the amount. And they say that to the extent that the father even can take a loan. He can take a loan to perform the Aqeeqah on behalf of his child. Imam Ahmad says that I hope from Allah that Allah would give him something quickly to repay his loan back. Why? Because he's now brought to life the sunnah of Rasoolullaah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So based on that, I would hope that Allah would give him something in return, some funds in return to pay back his loan as soon as possible. Shaykh Taqiyuddin rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that when is the loan aspect coming in? He says if a person hopes that in the near future he'll get some funds in to pay the loan back. So it's like somebody in the middle of the month, he knows his salary will come at the end of the month. So then he can then take a loan to perform the Aqeeqah. But some of the other ulama say no, still in this case you never know what can happen, so don't take a loan. Because Aqeeqah is not just for day 7, it's for any time in the life, it's for any time in the child's life. And therefore whenever the father is able, then the father can pay for the Aqeeqah. And the other fuqaha, the other three schools, they say if somebody is capable. So they would say, like the Shafi'i scholars specify that the amount we spoke of zakatul fitr, that the father having that much access to afford an animal. And then the Maliki fuqaha also, they say, and also Hanafi, to be able to afford the Aqeeqah. So the Hanafi fuqaha, they also say that it's for the father. It's for the father to perform the Aqeeqah, or because he's usually the main breadwinner in the family. But somebody else can volunteer to do so. On behalf of the father. In the same way we mentioned for the Shafi'i scholars. So they have a similar opinion to the Shafi'i scholars, and also like the others, because generally it is the father, and somebody else then to do this, they seek permission of the person who the action is on. So this action is on behalf of the father. This action has to be done by the father. So somebody else, in order to do this action that's for the father or for the person responsible for the expenses of the child, they need permission from that person because it's his ibadah. And when we say it's connected to the father, when we say it's connected to the father, then there's a few things connected to this. There's a few things connected to this. And that is, now we said in the Hanbali madhab, if the father has passed away or he refuses to do it, then anyone else can then do so. Anyone else can then do so. Anyone else can then do so. Another mas'ala, if the mother, if there's a child born out of wedlock, if there's a child born out of wedlock, the Shafi'i scholars speak on it. They say now, who is in charge of spending on this child? They say the mother. The mother is responsible for this child, right? His lineage is to the mother. His lineage is to the mother because it's out of wedlock. And then they say, does the mother perform the aqeeqah on behalf of the child? They say yes. They say she does so, but nihayat al-muhtaj, I think they say that she does not expose that she's done the aqeeqah. So she does it in private, because then already the child is born out of wedlock, and now you don't now expose that. On top of that, now you are connecting these kind of deeds to the child born out of wedlock. But you still do it on behalf of the child, because the child has no sin. The child has no sin, and it also helps the parent. Why does it help the parent? Because when Rasoolullaah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, kullu mawludin or kullu ghulamin murtahanun bi'aqiqatihi, that every child is basically that rahan is as a rahan to his aqiqah, then they say the meaning of this, that the child who, like it resembles what happened with Ismail alayhi salam in terms of a ransom. So the child gets ransomed, number one. Number two, slaughtering the aqeeqah also connects to something else, and that is, it is in the hope from Allah. It's like you're thanking Allah. It's like in the hope from Allah that the child then will grow healthy, and it will also protect the child, but the barakah of the aqeeqah, from any misfortunes and calamities in his life. Another aspect of the aqeeqah, Imam Ahmad rahmatullahi alayhi says that we said the child is basically like a rahan until his aqeeqah is done, and we said who has to perform the aqeeqah? The parent. So it's linked to the parent. Imam Ahmad says one of the meanings of this murtahan word is that the shafa'ah, the intercession for the child on behalf of the parents, is linked to the aqeeqah. So when the parent does the aqeeqah, until the parent does the aqeeqah on the child, then there will be no shafa'ah from the child. There will be no intercession from the child on behalf of the parents. So that's an important aspect. But some of the fuqaha, Ibn Qayyim and others, they don't agree with this because of a few other reasons on the intercession, that how does it link together, they question it. But without going into details, another view that many prefer is that it connects to the child ransoming himself and protecting himself, or it's a protection for the child from shaitan. Because from the time the child is born, shaitan comes and he basically like pokes the child. He pokes the child, then the child cries, and that is from the poking of shaitan. And from there, shaitan already comes and tries to affect the child. So by slaughtering the aqeeqah, it's hope from the barakah of this action that the child will be safe from shaitan. It will be a safety net for the child from shaitan. So these are some of the reasons connected to the meaning of the hadith and connecting to aqeeqah itself and connected to the wisdom of aqeeqah. So another mas'ala, and that is, if the father did not perform the aqeeqah until a person reaches maturity, until the person is now reached puberty, is the aqeeqah still on the father? Is the aqeeqah still on the father? Or can the person do aqeeqah on behalf of himself? Can the person do the aqeeqah on behalf of him or herself? Here the fuqaha say they have two opinions. Some of the fuqaha say, so now this is the Hanbali relied upon position of the Hanbali madhab, is that the person cannot do aqeeqah on behalf of himself. This is a sunnah for the father. But now the Shafi'i scholars mention that a person now can do aqeeqah on behalf of himself. So now once puberty has been reached, the aspect of aqeeqah being on the father now goes to the person, him or herself. So now once puberty has reached, then the chance for the father to do this ibadah is gone. And now it goes to the person, him or herself. And then that person can perform aqeeqah on behalf of him or herself now in that person's life, at some point in that person's life. Then the second opinion in the Hanbali madhab, which is a number of the fuqaha choose this opinion, they say it's exactly like the Shafi'i scholars. They say the person can do aqeeqah on behalf of himself. So connected to this, if a person, for example, he's reverted to Islam after maturity, right? He's reverted to Islam. And then can he perform Aqeeqah on behalf of himself? Can he perform or she perform Aqeeqah on behalf of himself? Or his children have now reverted. Or him and his children now have now reverted. Can they do Aqeeqah on behalf of themselves? Can they do Aqeeqah on behalf of themselves? Those of the fuqaha who say that Aqeeqah is not limited to day 7, as we're going to mention it now, and they say it's still sunnah or permissible, as we're going to mention just now, to do the Aqeeqah after those few days are gone, meaning let's now use it now after maturity or after those days. The masaa'il connects both ways. And what's important is we're going to mention masaa'il here, and in essence, a person must be able to connect the masaa'il, because now we mention, can a person do Aqeeqah on behalf of themselves after puberty? Now a person reverts after puberty. The masaa'il are connected. It might seem different, but the exact same rule goes both ways. So those fuqaha who say, Imam Ahmad was asked on this, and he said a person does not do Aqeeqah on behalf of himself if they've reverted. He says that is a sunnah on the father, and it's before puberty. It's before puberty. And that's what we said, the Hanbali position. The second position is a person does Aqeeqah on behalf of himself, and that's the Shafi'i position, which would mean, can he do Aqeeqah now? The answer is yes. As a Revert, the answer is yes. The Hanafi fuqaha, will touch on it again just now, but the Hanafi fuqaha, they would say out of permissible, let's touch on it better when we mention the days of the Aqeeqah. Let's say a person, another mas'ala, let's say a person passed away. And now let's say after maturity. Or after the set of time that we're going to mention just now on the days of the Aqeeqah. Let's say a person passed away without the Aqeeqah being done. So let's say a person's lost their father. This person who lost their father, the grandfather never did Aqeeqah on behalf of their father, and their father, in their father's life, did not do Aqeeqah on behalf of himself. Or if it's a mother herself, can the child do Aqeeqah on behalf of their deceased parent or deceased relative? Can you do Aqeeqah on behalf of them? The answer would be exactly as we say, build fiqh. Those who say the Aqeeqah is on the father and only the father, what would the answer be? The answer would be that you don't do it. That we said if the father passes away or he refuses to do so, then it falls onto somebody else. But then is there time for Aqeeqah? If the time for Aqeeqah is lapsed and the person has passed away, we're going to mention it just now, what's the times for Aqeeqah, then you know immediately this is a sunnah that's gone. But if there's scope still to do it, in terms of time of the Aqeeqah, and it's not on the father and somebody else wants to do it, then the answer would be permissible. The answer would be that it's permissible if somebody else can do it. So the Hanbali fuqaha say that if a person does Aqeeqah on himself, the relied upon position, or somebody else does it, they say it would not be makruh. So they don't say it's sunnah, they say it would not be makruh. They say we don't have dalil to show that it would be makruh, but it wouldn't be a sunnah. So it would be permissible. In fact, Al-Buhuti in Kashaf, he says, but it won't be deemed Aqeeqah. But others say that it will be permissible. He said it will just be like normal meat. So basically, essentially, the fuqaha generally speak on Aqeeqah being by the father or the person himself. On the father or the person himself, generally. Therefore, if your father or mother passed away, can you do Aqeeqah on their behalf? The answer would be no. Because it's either on the father, and the grandfather has passed away, and it's on the person himself. So you cannot then do the Aqeeqah. But in the case where somebody else can do the Aqeeqah, then we know how to build the masaa'il. So it's important to build the masaa'il, to realize the principle, the qawa'id of the masaa'il. So then the question might be different, but the answers would be deduced in a similar manner. Then the amount of animals to slaughter, the fuqaha say for a boy. Now this is for the Hanafi, Shafi'i and Hanbali scholars. They say 2 sheep for a boy, and 1 for a girl. So generally, what we're going to mention for the types of animals and things like that is the same as Udhiyyah. We're going to mention it in clarity just now. But so it will be, we're saying 2 sheep, right? Because the fuqaha speak on can you slaughter a camel or a cow. So that's why we're saying 2 sheep. But essentially, most of the things are going to be exactly the same as Udhiyyah. So what's the best color for the animal? What's the ages for the animal? What types of animals? Same as Udhiyyah. Except the Hanbali, we're going to mention it later. They don't allow, Hanbali and Maliki don't allow camels or cows. So basically, with a sheep, everything that we mentioned in Aqeeqah in Udhiyyah would apply here. So they say 1 sheep, they say 2 sheep. They say if a person cannot afford 2 sheep, then one sheep would be fine. One sheep would be fine. And it's one complete sheep. So it has to be one complete sheep on behalf of this child. One complete sheep. So not a portion, not a portion. Then connected to this, they say when you say slaughtering 2 sheep on behalf of the boy, does it have to be one after the other? Meaning on the same day, similar hours, similar time, you slaughter both? The fuqaha say no, they don't have to be at the same time. So a father can slaughter one animal now that he can afford, and then 10 years later or 5 years later, he can now afford another animal, and he can slaughter the second animal, the second sheep on behalf of the boy. Second sheep on behalf of the boy. The Maliki say you slaughter one sheep on behalf of a boy and one sheep on behalf of a girl. So they don't say 2, they say 1. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam slaughtered on behalf of his grandchild. The hadith is bikabshin kabshin. It says one animal, one sheep, it says one ram and one ram. So it gives off the way the hadith is phrased as if it was 1, not 2 on behalf of one and 2 behalf on the other one. So that's how the Maliki scholars look at that. And then the next mas'ala is a human that is a hermaphrodite. As we mentioned in the Udhiyyah, would you slaughter 2 animals or 1 animal for this person? On behalf of this baby, you'd slaughter. The Shafi'i scholars touch on this. They say that this baby would take the rule of a female, so 1 animal. Then a question would come, why 2 for a boy and 1 for a girl? Yes, the first thing is the hadith. The hadith of Aisha radiallahu anha, where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said 2 sheep on behalf of a boy. So that's there. And then the wisdom behind that, they say similar to inheritance. Inheritance, the male gets double of the female. So in this case, 2 for a boy and 1 for a girl. And then also they say it's like istibqa' nafs. It has this link to the well-being and the growing of the child. So therefore it has connection to diya. It has a connection to diya. So diya is basically blood money, or money you pay for an injury. If you've injured a person in certain body parts, or you've killed the person, or you've hurt the person, making him now disabled or to lose certain body parts. The fuqaha mentioned it in the chapter of diya in jinayat. So there, if a male caused this injury, the diya is generally double than if a female caused this injury. So that would be one of the things that are linked to udhiyyah, and hence 2 for a boy and 1 for a girl. Then if a person, now we have to know that udhiyyah can be performed in any place. So if a person told somebody else to do the udhiyyah on his behalf, whether the father is present or absent, so he has, let's say for example, he has a daughter, and he told this person, he's told to do the udhiyyah, the aqeeqah, to slaughter on his behalf. So we'll call the father the wakil, and we'll call this person, the slaughterer, going to be the muwakkil. Right? So this person who's on behalf of the father slaughtering, so the father has a daughter, he intends the aqeeqah on behalf of the daughter. This person comes and he slaughters, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. This is the aqeeqah of the son of so-and-so. So he made a mistake. He said son instead of daughter. He made the intention of a boy instead of a girl, or girl instead of a boy. What happens here? Or when we spoke last time, you can do the udhiyyah and the aqeeqah at one time, right? With one intention, one animal, 2 intentions. If the person said to the man, slaughter this animal for me for aqeeqah, and then this man went and slaughtered it for udhiyyah, not realizing. Or the other way, he said slaughter for udhiyyah, and that person knew there's a child born, so he slaughtered for aqeeqah. What would happen here? You say the intention of the wakil counts, because he's the original person, he's the father, he said slaughter for my daughter. So that person making a mistake at slaughtering doesn't affect. What matters is the intention of the wakil himself. So the next mas'ala is, we said udhiyyah in aqeeqah, we mentioned when the intention can be 2 in 1. We mentioned when they can be 2 in 1. So in the case when we said it's permissible, in the case where we said it's permissible, the Hanbali fuqaha, they are one of the schools who allow it. They say that if a person wants to slaughter the aqeeqah with the udhiyyah, but he didn't have the intention at the time of slaughtering the udhiyyah, or even the aqeeqah, you only had one thing in mind, but you were supposed to do the other one. It was in your dhimmah to do the other one. They say you slaughtering this animal would count for both. It would mean that your aqeeqah is ticked off. would you get the reward? You would not get the reward. You would not get the reward. Because the qaida is لا ثواب إلا بالنية. لا ثواب إلا بالنية. There's no reward without the intention. This is an important qaida. Ya Sheikh Umar, it's a qaida. You're listening or you're writing, who knows? So anyways, this yeah, very important qaida. So the qaida is there's no reward without intention. That's why even the Hanafi fuqaha, they would say, for example, if they would say that you don't need to specify an intention for, let's say, wudhu or ghusl. So if the body parts of wudhu got wet, you didn't have the intention, but they got wet as they would in wudu, then you would have wudu. So your wudu would be ticked off. But would you get the reward for wudu? The answer would be no. The answer would be no. You don't get the reward. Yes, it would be ticked off. You are in the state of wudu, but the reward, no. So the same thing here. They say that you'd get ticked off for the aqeeqah or ticked off for the udhiyyah, but without the intention, you'd not get the reward. You'd not get the reward. So you should have the intention, and then you get the reward as well. But some of the Hanbali fuqaha say you need the intention for both. So preferable to have the intention for both. So now, based on the fact that you can dual intention in aqeeqah, if a person has twins, for example, or a person has more than one child he hasn't done aqeeqah on behalf of, then can this person slaughter one animal or two animals if it's boys and have the intention of more than one child? Can he slaughter, let's say for boys, two animals? Let's say he has 3 sons. Can he slaughter 2 sheep and it's on the intention of all 3 children? Or must he slaughter 2, 2, 2, so 6? Or in the Maliki madhab, 1, 1, 1, 3. Or girls, 3 girls, 1, 1, 1. 1 sheep, 1 sheep, 1 sheep. So here, most of the fuqaha, Hanafi, Maliki, and Shafi'i scholars, including some of the Hanbali scholars, they say you must have each child has its own aqeeqah. Each child has its own aqeeqah. So each son, the father needs to slaughter 2 animals, or each daughter 1 animal. And that's because now Ibn al-Qayyim, he has this opinion from the Hanabila. He mentions, you see, you have those wisdoms of aqeeqah. So those wisdoms are connected to each child themselves. But other Hanbali fuqaha, they say that you can do this. They say you can do this because aqeeqah, you can intertwine intentions. So you can slaughter those 2 sheep on behalf of 3 children and have the intention in that, and inshallah it will count. So again, as we mentioned before, if you can afford more, do on each child. If you can't, then slaughter one aqeeqah, so 2 animals for a boy, 1 for a girl, and intend all your children. Then if a person can he perform the aqeeqah for more than 1 child on the same day? So now we're not speaking of twins, meaning if the time for the aqeeqah could be, let's say your 3rd child, let's say your 3rd son, your time for the aqeeqah is now on the 7th day, but you have 2 sons before that, they were born years ago. Can you perform the aqeeqah on the same day? The answer would be, again, in building fiqh, we said the aqeeqah to be done. We're going to mention it again, but we've touched on it earlier. The sunnah day of the aqeeqah is day 7. The sunnah, it's not wajib. Therefore, if a person did not do it on the sunnah day, and we allow it to do after, then can he do it now? The answer is yes. But for those 2 children that were born years ago, would the reward of the sunnah day 7 be there? The answer is no. Only this latest newborn, the reward of the day and the aqeeqah would happen. So that's another mas'ala to keep in mind. Something else to mention, we mentioned with shaving the hair. Once you've shaved the hair, then a person can bury the hair. He buries the hair. Like what he does generally with human body parts, he buries the hair. Some of the ulama say even if the person, if they can't bury it and they were to let the hair, you were to wash it down in a basin, that would be fine as well. So bury if possible. Otherwise, another respectable way to dispose of the human body parts, in this case the hair, then that would be the way to go. I forgot to mention it when we spoke about the hair. So now the date for slaughtering the animal. This aqeeqah, the fuqaha say it would be on day 7. Day 7 would be the sunnah day. Because Rasoolullaah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, تُذْبَحُ عَنْهُ يَوْمَ سَابِعِهِ. This aqeeqah is slaughtered on the person, on behalf of the person on day 7. And therefore, we're going to say, the fuqaha say, preferably also in the early parts of the day, duha. So like the Maliki scholars, they say until zawal, like how we mentioned the timings for Udhiyyah, but here the same starting point from the Maliki scholars of day 7, even the others, starting point is 1, until duha would be in the mustahab time. Then the Maliki scholars saying that in the rest of the day until sunset would be makruh, and then at night would be haram. Again, we have to remember the Udhiyyah, they say invalid to slaughter at night. Invalid to slaughter at night. The other fuqaha say it's makruh on one opinion, the other opinion permissible. The other opinion permissible. So therefore, that's the Maliki opinion, but any time in the day on the 7th day, it would be fine to slaughter. They mention in the morning. They mention in the morning. Now we have to remember when we discuss many of these masaa'il of Aqeeqah and many of the masaa'il of naming a child, something that floats around a lot of these masaa'il is that the habit of the Salaf is they always looked for good omens and positive things in most of the actions and most of the sayings. This is something they always try to make sure positivity was around them, in the actions, in the sayings, in the thoughts. So you're going to find a lot of the masaa'il, like here, some of the fuqaha mention, why do they say dhahwa? Why do they say in the early morning, duha time? They say out of optimism. So other things you're going to mention about breaking the bones of the udhiyyah, of the Aqeeqah. They say don't do that. Why? Optimism. Out of optimism, good omen that the child would be, he's saved from his bones breaking, for example. So a lot of the things rotate around good omen and good name. Why? Good omen, the child would live up to his good name. So that's why you change the bad names. You change the bad names. So this is something that's going to recur throughout a lot of the masaa'il. A lot of the masaa'il we're going to mention. So now why day 7? Why day 7? So here are some of the fuqaha. Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that generally, again, optimism is filled here. Optimism is filled. Why? He says because generally a person, let's say, is born on a Saturday, that the day 7 would be when? The day 7 would be on the Friday. The day 7 would be on the Friday. So by that time, the child would have lived through every day of the week. He would have lived through Saturday, lived through Sunday, lived through Monday, lived through Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then on Friday. So he'd have lived all 7 days. So they say out of optimism that the child, since he lived so many days, hopefully he would live then through all the months of the year, and then for many years, So that's why they say the day 7 is chosen. Day 7 is chosen so the child has lived through each day of the week. The child has lived through each day of the week. And they say that a number of aspects are connected to a full week, like the creation of the heavens and the earth. It took 6 days. So on the 7th day, then it was created. So these things are linked to a similar thing. These things are linked to a similar thing of 7 days. In saying that, I'm just thinking of the word rahan. There was one more thing. Some of the fuqaha, the muhaddithin, they mention in the explanation of the hadith, murtahan, they say that the child is a ni'mah of Allah. It's a bounty of Allah. And this bounty, we said, it's as if it is shackled. It is taken. We said it's like a rahan. It's like a rahan, withheld by somebody else. So to ransom, for the child to have ransom and to be emancipated from this rahan, you slaughter the Aqeeqah out of thankfulness to Allah and in the hope that the child would grow in a healthy manner and would be saved from calamities and things like that, and also protected from shaitan. That's another way they phrase it, similar to what we mentioned earlier. But I'm remembering now one of the muhaddithin actually mentioned the aspect of the rahan, and to emancipate this rahan, to make this rahan loose and free again, it's doing the Aqeeqah out of shukr to Allah, out of thanks to Allah. So that's one of the things mentioned, what we mentioned earlier. So now we said the Aqeeqah is on day 7, the sunnah is on day 7, and we mentioned why. But now before day 7, is it permissible? The answer is that it is permissible. Before day 7, it is permissible to slaughter the Aqeeqah. It is permissible to slaughter the Aqeeqah, and they say that the first time of the Aqeeqah is when the entire child is out of the womb. From that moment on, you can start doing the Aqeeqah. From that moment on, you can start doing the Aqeeqah. So when we say this, we mention that joining the intention of Aqeeqah and Udhiyyah. So now, what does that mean? That means if Udhiyyah happens on a date that Aqeeqah is permissible on, or a sunnah on, then you can have the dual intention. So it doesn't mean that if Udhiyyah, one of the 3 days, or in Shafi'i scholars 4 days, but let's say 3 days, one of the 3 days of Udhiyyah is day 7 of the child. Yes, that would mean the sunnah Aqeeqah gets performed, but it doesn't need to be. Because Aqeeqah can happen from the moment the entire child is out of the womb. So if it happened to be day 2 and 3 and 4 are the days of Udhiyyah, and a father wants to dual intention or slaughter both animals at this time because it's easier for him, permissible. He can dual intention because it's the time for Udhiyyah and it's the time for Aqeeqah. It's the time for Udhiyyah and time of Aqeeqah. So let's say he hadn't slaughtered on day 7, and we say we allow Aqeeqah. We're going to mention the other times when it ends and things like that. When is the sunnah times? Is there more after sunnah times after 7? But let's assume there isn't. Let's assume it's day 43. It's day 43. No Aqeeqah has been slaughtered, and now it's Udhiyyah. Can the father dual intention? The father can. The father can. He can do so because the sunnah time is day 7. The sunnah time is day 7. And for the father, the sunnah time of Aqeeqah is not linked to a child being the time before puberty. Even if after puberty the father wants to do Aqeeqah, he can do the Aqeeqah. And again, it would link to some of the meanings we mentioned of the word murtahan. So if we link it to shafa'ah, then the father can still do it because it's linked to shafa'ah. And therefore, connected to this again is another mas'ala, and that is, let's say a child was born. Let's say a child was born and then passed away before day 7. Or a child was born dead. Or number 3, the child was aborted, for example. Not specifically aborted, but a miscarriage. Then what would the rule be on the Aqeeqah there? So now the fuqaha say for this situation, the sunnah would be day 7, and this day 7 has gone. It won't be reached. The child has passed away. So the Maliki scholars say that day 7 is the day for Aqeeqah. And if the child does not live until day 7, then there's no Aqeeqah. Now, some of the fuqaha would say, like some of the Hanbali fuqaha indicate, we're going to mention what I think in the Hashiyah of Ibn Ga'id or Labadi or Ibn Nasrullah, one of them touch on the mas'ala clearly. But they indicate that one of the reasons, if it means the salama, the child living on through the barakah of the Aqeeqah, then this wisdom is not going to be achieved by day 7, is gone. So is there a benefit then of slaughtering the Aqeeqah? The answer would be no, based on this wisdom. But we say it's only one of the wisdoms. And Imam Ahmad himself preferred the reason of shafa'ah. So when we link it to the wisdoms of this hadith of murtahan, then that opens us a door to this answer of what we ask now. What we ask now about the child passing away before day 7, or passing away before Aqeeqah is done, So here, the Shafi'i scholars say, the one opinion that let's just mention the second opinion for time purposes. Ibn Hajar al-Haythami, he says that if more than 4 months have gone for the child in the womb, and then the child passes away after 4 months or before the 7th day, obviously after the 4 months, then you do Aqeeqah. And this is also the Hanbali position. That if the child more than 4 months, if the child is born, if the child passed away before 7 days, and also it connects to if the child is born, if the child passed away after 4 months. Before 4 months, they say no Aqeeqah. This is by all the ulama. Why? Because they say the soul is not yet blown into the fetus, and they say that when do you benefit from the shafa'ah of your child, or when will resurrection happen to a human? They say after the soul has been blown. So that means after 4 months. So after 4 months, this child will be resurrected. After 4 months, it can intercede for its parents. So here, since that aspect is there, then therefore you do the Aqeeqah. You can still do the Aqeeqah. But before 4 months, now there's no soul blown into the child, into the fetus. So therefore, there would be no resurrecting for this fetus. Would be no resurrecting for this fetus. It never became a human. It never became into a stage of now becoming a human. So therefore, no Aqeeqah there. In the Hanbali madhab, in the Hanafi madhab, they also speak on similar to the Maliki madhab in terms of sunnah being day 7, which means if a child was born, still born, so the child passed away when it was born, or before the 7th day, or after 4 months, then in essence the sunnah aspect would not be there. But some of the Hanafi fuqaha mentioned it's permissible to still do the Aqeeqah. It's permissible to still do the Aqeeqah. Why? Again, what's the wisdoms we mentioned of the Aqeeqah? It's there. Another thing, Imam Muhammad rahmatullah alayhi from the Hanafi madhab, he says, it's still a child Allah blessed you with. So out of shukr and thanks to Allah for the child, you still slaughter the animal. You still slaughter the animal. You still slaughter the animal. So that is for the child who passed away. And then based on that, we can link if the child passed away after 7 days and no Aqeeqah was done. But now once 7 days are there, then the matter is broad scope. The matter is broad scope. So now if the father could not afford the Aqeeqah at the time of the Aqeeqah, on day 7, then he could not afford it when the child was born. So the fuqaha say, most of them say the father must be financially capable of performing the Aqeeqah. If he was not at the time of birth, but then became financially capable before day 7, then they say it's sunnah. Because what we mentioned before is the time, waqt al-khitab, the time when this action comes to the person who the ibadah is directed to. You look at that time. So at the time when the baby was born, that's the first time for Aqeeqah. The father did not have the financial capability to perform Aqeeqah. So was this ibadah of Aqeeqah directed to the father at the time when it became applicable? The answer is no. So that's why they discussed this mas'ala. But now before the sunnah time, he's now became financially capable. So they say if before day 7 he became financially capable, then it's sunnah for him to do it. It's sunnah for him to still do the Aqeeqah. So now if he became financially capable after the 7th day, then the Shafi'i scholars say that in this case, if the lady is still in actual nifas, if the lady is in actual nifas, then in this case they say that it's recommended for the father to still do the Aqeeqah. But if she's out of actual nifas, but the maximum period of nifas of 40 days, so let's say her nifas ended at day 25, but the maximum period is still there, that means the maximum period until 40 days, let's say he became capable on day 32. So the maximum period of nifas has not been reached, but it's over the actual nifas the lady is in, then they say in this case, he doesn't have to. It's not a sunnah, he doesn't have to perform the Aqeeqah. Can he? Yes, we mentioned why he can and the aspect connected to that. So a couple of things before we end off. And that is number one, we said that the Aqeeqah is from the wealth of the father. We said it's from the wealth of the father or the person taking care of the child. The father or the person taking care of the child. So if the father does Aqeeqah from the wealth of the child, the father does Aqeeqah from the wealth of the child, then the father is responsible to repay the child for this amount, because it's supposed to be from his wealth. It's supposed to be from his wealth. That's the opinion of the majority of the ulama, even the strong opinion of the Maliki madhab. So when we say for example, the Hanbali madhab saying it's on behalf of the father, then the hadith says Rasoolullaah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did Aqeeqah on behalf of Al-Hasan and Hussein, his grandchildren, radiyallahu anhum. Or in the Shafi'i madhab, they say it's on behalf of the person does it who is financially responsible of the child. They say on the basis that the child is poor. Because if the child has his own money through gifts or something, then it's only mustahab to use your own money to spend on the child. Or it's recommended you do it out of your own choice. But you are looking after the child, but the child doesn't need your financial support. He has his own gifts or something, so you become the wali in his wealth. You look after the wealth of the child, and then those rules that come when you are looking after somebody else's wealth apply. So now, in saying that, why did Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam do the Aqeeqah? Or Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did the Aqeeqah on behalf of Al-Hasan and Hussein radiyallahu anhuma. So then why do the fuqaha say on behalf of the father? So here the Hanbali madhab says, because the verse in the Quran says, النبي أولى بالمؤمنين من أنفسهم وأزواجه أمهاتهم. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is more right to the believers than their own selves. So that's why Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did it on behalf of his grandsons. The Shafi'i scholars say that perhaps it was that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam commanded Ali radiallahu anhu to do the Aqeeqah on behalf of his sons. So the hadith came as if Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did it, but it was Ali radiallahu anhu who did it. The other explanation they have is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did the Aqeeqah on behalf of Al-Hasan and his grandsons, because the father could not afford it. So then as the grandfather, he's then responsible for them. They mentioned a third reason, I can't recall it at this moment. And then our last mas'ala, Aqeeqah on behalf of an orphan. Aqeeqah on behalf of an orphan. Here, the Maliki scholars and the Hanbali scholars say that the Aqeeqah is done on behalf of an orphan from the wealth of the orphan. From the wealth of the orphan, they say similar to Udhiyyah, but they say Aqeeqah has preference over Udhiyyah because it's linked to those wisdoms we mentioned of being murtahan, of being like a rahan. So they say the Aqeeqah on behalf of an orphan is done, recommended to do, and on behalf from the wealth of the orphan. Okay, then just two quick masaa'il, then we can end off. It's already an hour. We will see another day to finish, inshallah. Maybe Thursday or Friday, we'll try and finish Aqeeqah, and then next week the names. So we said on day 7 is one of the 2 recommended times of naming a child. So if a person renames a child, if a person changes the name of the child, does the person have to repeat Aqeeqah? The answer to that is no. The answer to that is no. You do not have to repeat Aqeeqah if you change the name of the child, number 1. Number 2, is it a stipulation that the father or a parent sees the blood of the animal of Aqeeqah of their child in order for the Aqeeqah to be valid? The answer is no. The answer is no. Okay, so with that we finished the main masaa'il connected to Aqeeqah. There's just a few things left, and the main technical masaa'il, we've covered them, inshallah. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to grant us sincerity in everything we say and we do, and to grant us beneficial knowledge. And وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.